Hello, thank you so much for joining me on this new episode of Shadow Stories with V. That's me. I know I said on the last episode that I wouldn't choose a story about romance and love because that's what I chose to do last time. But unfortunately, the story I did want to read was already, the rights had already been sold, and so the writer didn't give me the approval since they didn't give me permission because it was sold, so I chose a different story in which I do have permission to read. The reason I decided to narrate the story that I'm going to read to you in a few minutes was because I was reminded of love notes and poems and innocence and all the beautiful things that make things both beautiful and dangerous. I don't know if you've ever had somebody write you cute little notes, maybe when you were in high school or grade school, or maybe you had some delivered anonymously. Valentine's Day, under your door in the middle of the night, a secret lover that you never actually found out. Maybe you did, and things turned out terribly, terribly wrong. Well, this story is even more interesting because it involves fortune cookies. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I love me some fortune cookies. Well, I kind of like them. They're okay. But I love, and some of my friends will tell you this, I love to read the fortunes. This next story is written by a wonderful author that I have been in contact with, and I actually got permission to read this story from them. The title of this story is I Used to Get Love Letters Tucked Inside Fortune Cookies. How adorable is that title? I love it. I hope you love it as much as I do. Say what you will about American Chinese food. I would argue it's its own cuisine. Once you get past the classic complaints of, it's not authentic and it's so unhealthy, the snobbish distaste towards boxed Chinese food at the mall is wholly undeserved. Who doesn't enjoy a plate of fast food noodles with a side chosen from a very nearly infinite menu of fried chicken, tossed in chili peppers, cashews, or heavens forbid, oranges? The paragon of the American Chinese cuisine is the fortune cookie. Terribly unhealthy and definitely not Chinese at all. But it's sweet and crunchy with a message inside that can be taken with a lighthearted laugh. There's nothing to dislike about that. I worked a summer job in Houston where the Chinese restaurant at the local mall served every boxed meal with a house-made fortune cookie. The store had a little glass window in its kitchen where a college-aged part-timer sat, whipping a meringue for the batter and handwriting fortunes with a blue ballpoint pen, while the cookies baked in the oven behind him. Sometimes I could see his manager standing at the stove off to the side, tossing a pound of noodles and glancing through the glass at the waiting customers. The restaurant was my go-to when I didn't want to cook dinner or when I needed an excuse to walk around the mall after a particularly dull day at work. They offered deliveries, but I enjoyed the bustle of the mall, and besides, the food would be cold by the time it arrived at my house. My favorite order was chow mein with a side of General Tso's chicken. After my meal, I would break open the fortune cookie and read some charmingly inconsequential fortune the part-timer behind the glass window had written. One day, I broke open the cookie and saw a message that was longer than usual, written in tiny, cramped handwriting to fit it all onto the slip of paper. It said, I love you, but I don't know how to let you know. My eyes went wide. I looked at the glass window of the kitchen where the part-timer was folding the fortune cookies. He looked up at the same time and our eyes met just for a moment. Then he quickly looked down and placed a cookie on his baking tray. I wasn't sure of what to do, so for a small while I watched him work. The cookies came out of the oven in little soft discs, and he placed a fortune on each disc, and quickly folded them into the familiar shape, as he lined up the cookies on his baking tray to cool and harden. He looked up at me again. I gave him a small wave. He looked genuinely surprised, and his eyes lit up with a nervous smile. The next time I bought a meal, I cracked open the cookie first. The same cramped handwriting to fit a longer than average message on a small slip of paper greeted me. You're beautiful, and I hope you know that. I wish you nothing but the brightest of days. I looked at the window to the kitchen. The part-timer broke into a grin as if he had been discreetly waiting for me to look his way. I smiled and his ears turned pink. The fortune cookie messages kept coming. I frequented the restaurant even more than before. The fortunes were something I looked forward to now. How was your day? Make a face at the window and I'll be looking if I'm not too busy. I wonder what you think of me. If I talk to you, I think I might just ruin it all. I'm writing this while you're not here. It means I miss you. Sometimes the wall of the kitchen feels like such a distance. I catch glimpses of you from here and it's never enough. After that last message, I turned over the slip of paper, took out a pen, and wrote my name and phone number on the back of the fortune. Then I walked up to the window to the kitchen and tapped on the glass. The part-timer, startled, and looked up from his work. I held up my message against the window. His eyes widened and he broke into a grin. He quickly pulled an empty slip of paper from a box and copied down my number, knocking over a bottle of vanilla extract in his haste. His manager walked over from the commotion and scowled at him, and then turned to look at me. I quickly lowered my hands and stuffed the message in my pocket. Something by the stove started smoking. The manager rushed to put out the grease fire, saving both me and the part-timer any further embarrassment. That night, after eagerly waiting for what felt like hours, my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number, 9:45 p.m. When you told me your name, it occurred to me that you didn't know mine. All this time, hi, I'm Kai. Kai and I exchanged texts all night and all day, and talked on the phone for hours on end, even though his words weren't confined to slips of paper inside fortune cookies anymore. Kai's special fortunes I got with my order whenever I ate at the restaurant still made me smile. I wish you'd look at me more when you eat, but I understand the allure of food, so I forgive you, smiley face. You look especially beautiful today. I wish this glass wasn't here. Sometimes I just wait for you to show up, you know? Once, when I entered the restaurant, I looked at the kitchen window and noticed Kai wasn't there. Before I could wonder where he had gone, the steel door to the kitchen opened and he came out holding 2 cups of ice-cold lemon tea. I hope you like lemon, he said, smiling sheepishly, or else I might have to go back to the kitchen and make something else. What are you doing? I asked, admittedly flustered, though I wasn't sure why. I realized that I had never seen him standing. He was taller than I expected. I got out early today. We could have a stupid middle school mall date. I grinned, took the lemon tea, and jabbed the straw towards the door to the kitchen. Somebody's getting in trouble for this. Kai turned just in time to see his manager frowning back at him before the door slipped closed. Whatever. He's half a step from firing me anyway, for being so distracted. He raised an eyebrow at me meaningfully, and I laughed. Come on, let's get out of here. There's better food to be had on our first date. That evening, with a stuffed rabbit plush from the arcade tucked under my arm and the sweetness of vanilla ice cream on the tip of my tongue, Kai gently leaned me up against the corner of the breezeway and kissed me. I laid awake in bed far past midnight because I couldn't stop thinking about it and smiling. I pulled out my phone and began typing. 1:08 a.m. How do you say, I miss you again? 1:08 a.m. In Chinese, I mean. I didn't receive a reply for a few minutes. Just when I decided he must be asleep, my phone lit up. 1:15 a.m. Haha, I don't speak Chinese. Actually, my parents do, but maybe I can ask them. I blinked and then started typing again. 1:15 a.m. But what about 1:16 a.m.? The fortune you wrote that one time. 1:16 a.m. Fortune? Question mark. 1:16 a.m. You wrote, I miss you. 1:16 a.m. I did? When? 1:19 a.m. Hello? 1:25 a.m. You awake? I stared at his messages for a long time, my thumbs moving swiftly. 1:30 a.m. You wrote messages for me in the fortune cookies. It was his turn to go silent. I waited, my heart starting to pound a sickening beat. When the messages came, my throat went dry. 1:38 a.m. The cookies are made days in advance, and all I've ever written in them are horoscopes and lucky numbers. I just put them all in a basket. I don't assemble the meals. The person who does that is my manager. I stared at my desk where I had carefully kept all of the fortunes Kai had written for me. My phone started ringing, but I didn't pick up. It rang for a long time, and then it stopped, and then it rang again for a shorter while. Then a message appeared. 1:54 a.m. What has he been writing you? It's going to be okay. Whatever happened, I'm going to help you figure it out, okay? My hands trembled as I typed. Okay, I think... Do you really think it's him? It has to be okay. He doesn't know my address or anything, right? Do I call the police? Kai? I waited desperately for a response, for some reassurance. I laid in bed and stared blankly at my screen. I waited until fatigue began to take over. Until I felt my eyelids grow heavy despite everything. Until I fell asleep vaguely wondering why he had stopped talking. The next morning, he was all over the news. The article said that he had been found around 5 a.m. by an early morning jogger who noticed the blood on the doorstep of his apartment. He had been long dead by then. It was a murder. The police were searching all over for the perpetrator. The most horrifying, sensational article said his body was found missing all its teeth. I didn't go to work for days after that. In fact, I didn't set foot outside my house for a good while. I ordered food and watched television and tried not to look at the rabbit plush sitting on my dresser. 2 days in, I couldn't bear its brown doll eyes and I stuffed it underneath my bed. My clueless co-workers messaged me, asking where I was, and my boss called me a couple of times. I didn't pick up. They never caught the murderer. A little less than a week into the self-isolation, I heard a knock on my door and got up thinking it was the cheap pasta I had ordered for lunch. When I opened the door, a young woman was standing there with a plastic bag in her hand. But the smell that wafted through the air was not the acidic tang of marinara. "Chow mein and General Tso's chicken?" she droned. "Right?" I stared at her like she had turned into the monster of my nightmares. She raised an eyebrow. "Do I have the wrong address?" I kept staring. The woman crossed her arms. "Did you order this or not?" "The manager said you would know what to do, whatever that means." My hand moved on its own, and the deliverer rolled her eyes as I took the bag from her. She left before I could say anything. I closed my door and opened the bag like there might be something terrible inside. But it was the familiar meal, the quintessential American Chinese takeout, complete with a fortune cookie. The fortune cookie, it was slightly lumpy in shape, and at first I thought it was because the manager didn't have the deft hands that Kai did. But after a moment I realized that all my cookies had been folded by the manager, and those had looked perfect. I picked up the cookie. There was a sickening weight to it. One last warning before I could break it open. I put my thumbs up against the two tips of the cookie and pulled. There was a sharp crack of hardened sugar and meringue breaking at the seam. 3 white teeth bounced on the table, still flecked with bits of dried blood. Along with them, a slip of paper with tiny, cramped handwriting. "Stop flirting with him. You're supposed to be mine. The end, friends. I hope that you enjoyed the story as much as I did. Although I wonder where it all went wrong. The protagonist of the story, we never actually get her name, but we do know Kai's name. And poor Kai suffered a fate he had hardly any idea that he was going to take a part in. It was such a meet cute, right? She assumed that it was the part-timer behind the kitchen writing her all these cute little love notes. And to be honest, if I were in her position, I would have assumed the same thing. And maybe the manager was like this older, creepo-looking guy, and, maybe she didn't think that he was interested in her. She was interested in the young guy behind the window. Now it is time for me to close out the show. Thank you so very much for watching it and being here with me in this reality of Shadow Stories. I want to ask you to do something. Whenever you have time, grab a piece of paper and write something on it, romantic for somebody else, and just leave it there for them. You don't have to say that it's from you. Anonymous will work just as well. And let them know how you feel. Just let it out there. Let the world know how much you like them, or that you miss them and you can't wait to see them again. And send it to them. I promise you, it'll make them feel butterflies, even if they're uncalled for butterflies. I'm closing out the circle. Thank you for being here, and come join me on the next episode of Shadow Stories with me.